Alcohol is killing us, literally. And yet, despite its well documented risks, we still use it as a go to for networking, social bonding, and even workplace culture. Why do we normalize something that's so harmful? What would happen if we started to shift the conversation? In this episode of Sober Life Rocks, we're diving into the real impact of alcohol on our health, our communities, and the way we connect with each other. Stay tuned. This is a conversation you don't want to miss.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Today, I'm honored to introduce you to Dr. Akhil Anand, a distinguished psychiatrist specializing in addiction psychiatry. Dr. Anand serves as staff psychiatrist at the Cleveland Clinic's Alcohol and Drug Recovery Center and is the program director for the Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship at the University Hospital's Cleveland Medical Center. His extensive experience encompasses inpatient alcohol and drug withdrawal treatment, treatment from alcohol-associated liver disease, and the development of evidence-based medical education for substance use disorders. Dr. Anand, welcome to the show. I am so honored to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I just kind of wanted to start out on a broad scale. Like, alcohol is everywhere in our culture, from work events to family gatherings. Why do you think that we continue to use it as a primary way to connect, despite knowing it can be problematic?
You're right. I mean, it's very much entrenched in our culture. And oftentimes I have to remind patients that that's not everywhere, right? It may be here where we live, but if you go to other places in Asia or, in Europe and stuff, it's not necessarily the same thing. I think alcohol has that disinhibition factor. It loosens people up. They feel a little bit more relaxed, as it does for a lot of folks, and it makes it easier to communicate. I'm seeing a change. I'm seeing younger folks are moving away from that, but you nailed it. I mean, it's really entrenched in our culture. You use alcohol during good times and bad times. At baby showers. I've seen it, of course, at weddings. I've seen it at funerals. So it's really part of our culture, and from legislative policies to marketing to who we look up to, it's really everywhere. I remember when Barack Obama had a beer and everybody celebrated, and now like every president has a beer. It's like it's a thing. And so and these are great people and they're doing great things, and it's just, if someone else sees that, it can really it can be influential.
Yeah. And I remember, I travel a lot for my work. And so I go to all these conferences. And I remember when I quit drinking, I thought to myself, how am I going to go to these events? How am I going to navigate that? And am I going to stick out like a sore thumb and be like the different one everybody's looking at? This was 20 years ago. And so it was very much so different. But even today, it's just the way, like when we see somebody as we're checking in, they're like, hey, let's meet at the bar for happy hour, right? It's just the way that we talk about things.
It's so, I don't have to live that experience because, I'm an addiction psychiatrist, so no one does that to me. But like, I do have a lot of patients that are in sales and in that world where there are things that alcohol is actually really part of their business. And sadly, a lot of times they do the things they drink water, or they drink soft drinks that look like cocktails or whatever, and or
The club soda and the lime.
that's it.
Yep.
And they have to live that thing. I think things are changing. I'm hopeful things are changing. I've been talking to more folks about it. I was actually at a dinner just this week, and people were drinking, and two of us had mocktails, and they had like 16 different mocktails. And so, like, at the restaurant, it was like awesome, and each bartender had apparently a specific, like, their go-to mocktail. So me and my friend, we had a mocktail together, and things are changing, but I can't imagine how hard it is, and I also feel like it adds to the stigma, like I have to
Hmm.
hide, uh, you know, what I am, for so I can fit in. And I hope things are changing. I feel like people are becoming more and more confident. Uh, People coming out of being anonymous and really speaking up about, their recovery journey is important. But it's not up to them to do that in that setting. It's hard.
That's
It's
right.
absolutely hard, but I think I see change. I do see change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was secretly sober for 18 years. I didn't tell anybody in my professional life that I didn't drink. And I navigated all of that, trying to fit in while not disclosing that about myself. And it was only because of a particular event that I decided it was time. It was time at 18 and a half years at that point to come out and tell the world. And so here I am now running this podcast on Sober Life Rocks. And today it's been phenomenal. Today the world is shifting and people are applauding that. But I think for many, many people, that stigma still is there and they're still nervous.
That sucks.
So,
Hearing that 18 and a half years, you should have been celebrating those 18 and a half years. Like, really, you should have been celebrating. If you came up to me and you told me that, and seeing, again, I'm not in recovery myself, but living through it indirectly through patients and family members, and friends, I mean, I would celebrate you for 18 and a half
yeah,
years. It's, yeah, I'm, I'm really happy that you were able to come out and share your recovery and open up about it. I hope others will do the same.
thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to shift to more of your like lane, and that is there's all these misconceptions. There's information that's come at us from different places and different times about the effect of alcohol on our body and our mind. Like I remember when I was drinking, there was all these reports, if you have a glass of red wine every day, that's really good for you. So I was like, yes, one is good, two must be better, right? And then there was, oh no, alcohol is bad for you. And then it's, well, certain types of alcohol, certain amounts. And so all of these myths are out there. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions today about alcohol that you think still persist?
What you just mentioned, that whole drink a glass of wine a day, it's good for your health. Good for your heart in particular. And we know that's not true now. You know, the antioxidants and the chemicals that are beneficial that are found in grapes, you don't need to drink wine for that. And studies we have huge ecological studies, so that have like spanned 170 countries, and we have also our own randomized studies where cohort-based studies that are just local that have shown the same thing over and over and over again, that alcohol, even a standard drink a day, uh, can be harmful to the body. I explain this to my patients always the same way. I don't know if it connects or not connects, but I always say that, what do we use alcohol for? We use alcohol to clean our toilets, and it's in all the cleaning products. And the reason is because alcohol is so good at breaking down protein. It's very effective at that. Our whole body is made out of protein. So from head to toe, it causes over 200 different diseases. It causes early onset dementia. It ages your skin, causes blindness, oral cancers, esophageal cancers, stomach cancers, liver cancers. It causes your heart to become fatty. It causes the rhythm of your heart. So not only does it become fatty, but it doesn't pump as well. It causes osteoporosis, osteopenia, kidney failure. It affects your sperm production. It affects the quality of your ovaries. It causes depression, anxiety, panic attacks, even makes people psychotic. Um, so, you know, you wonder, is there a real utility for it? And I think a lot of it goes back to your first question about cultural needs.
Hmm.
Um, People think of it as a way to like become friends with people. And I wish we could change that cultural norm because it's really bad for you. It really is.
So, is there, I mean, that litany, that list of all the things that it causes, is there a safe amount to drink?
It goes to the whole idea of like moderation. You know, technically, no. But if you are someone who drinks at, and is following the guidelines, is not drinking under the driving under the influence, and is doing, is not having any type of addiction or compulsive nature towards it. I mean, it's legal, and again, it's so culturally accepted. But if you had to ask me like straight yes or no, I would say don't drink at this point.
Hmm.
The data that we
Hmm.
know, there's really no benefit from it.
I think it was you. I watched a podcast that talked about like if aliens came down and saw us today, what would they be thinking?
Right. No, I think I said something like if cannabis and alcohol came on the down on the planet and it was, just those two, which one would now what we know about alcohol versus cannabis, which one would have been legal? And you can make the argument that maybe it should be cannabis. I mean, they both have their negative effects. And I always wonder, why we need to have mind altering substances to begin with, because there's really goodness in just appreciating your where you are without anything. But I think that's what you're referring to. But
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
it is definitely something that now what we know, it's something that I would definitely discourage my friends, my family, my kids from consuming at
Yeah.
this
Talk to me a little bit. When I was getting sober, I was so fortunate. I got to go to a treatment center where there was really, really good professionals coming talking about addiction medicine. And they talked about the mechanism of sort of the amygdala attaching the stress relief signal to alcohol. But this was 20 years ago. So I would love to know a little bit about the kind of the mechanism of addiction and how you go from thinking that you are just casually drinking
Yeah,
and into that next step of some form of dependency that leads to more and more.
I'll say this, and I sincerely mean this. I feel that, going from that idea of like, drinking casually, socially, moderation, and you know this better than I do, but I really sincerely believe when I say this that most folks, all folks with alcohol use disorder or other substance addiction or behavioral addiction for that matter, it's not their fault. It really isn't. Um, the only fault in them is they tried it. Um, Family, genetics, psychiatric co-occurring diseases, medical co-occurring diseases, your social upbringing, your parental modeling. There's so many factors that go in place to make someone struggle with substance use disorders. It's uncanny, you know. And if I list them all out, like there's so many. Like this is why it happens. It's really oftentimes it's not the individual. And what happens to folks that makes folks that are using recreationally to patients having a full-blown addiction is that it's a behavioral condition. It's a chronic neurobiological condition, which has a behavioral component. And what I mean by saying that is that you nailed it. It affects your neural circuitry. So it affects the reward pathway and literally hijacks it. And so it things that you would find pleasure in anyways, like a good slice of pizza or a warm hug from a family member or, I don't know, watching Beethoven, whatever it is that makes you feel good, those pleasures decrease and your whole body is hijacked by the need for substances, and whatever substance of your choice, whether it be alcohol, whether it be other drugs. And so the person is basically um, succumbed to the desire and the need for that just to live.
Mm.
Um, and so you see a lot of things. You saw this probably, you know this uh, better than I do, Margie, but like you'll have good people, very good people, who, will lie and trick and steal and minimize and be evasive and gaslight and all kinds of weird things they do to protect that relationship with the substance. That's the behavioral part. So the neurological is what the brain hijacking happens, and then the behavioral part is how it's manifests and how it presents to us
Mhm.
from outside.
That hijacking that you talk about, I remember, I was of what we call high functioning. And so, going to work every day, raising my kids as a single mom, going to all of their activities, all the things. But I remember one day vividly, I was driving home from work and running a little bit late. And I thought to myself, what do I have in the house? I probably need milk. Nah, it's not worth stopping. Oh, I need something to drink. I'm going to stop. So I wouldn't stop to get milk for my kids, but I would stop to get myself something to drink.
And
And
again,
it literally felt like a hijack.
and you're not a bad person. And it's this is the thing is like it really it's not you're a bad person. It's addiction is so powerful, that it really just it's not even about you. It's about the addiction. It's not about your
Yeah.
kids. It's about the addiction.
And I love now this term that we use. It's not, black and white, alcoholic, not alcoholic, living under a bridge or not, right? Now we talk about the substance use disorder, and it is this spectrum. And the idea that I understand is that if it's become problematic in some aspects of your life, that you don't need to wait until it becomes devastating to all areas of your life. Right. And so talk to me about a little bit about what the current medical thinking is about that disorder spectrum.
So yeah, the spectrum. So yeah, I think for a long time you either had dependence or you were an alcoholic, right? Very stigmatizing term, but it was used very loosely. And it's still used, I think, in the 12 steps community, and they can do
Mm-hmm.
that. It's their territory. And we've now changed to like a spectrum of severity from mild, moderate, and severe. Um, and what's nice about that, what's bad about it is that everybody's addiction manifests differently, and depending on patients' you know functionality and how they go about their lives, it's sometimes hard to like just wedge them into mild, moderate, severe. And oftentimes patients go from severe to mild to severe and change. So it can be kind of tricky in that way. But what's nice about it is, we can, for a long time, the focus was, um, really helping those alcoholics,
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
severe alcohol use disorder patients, technically, when it really, we can help people early on before they get to that point. So that's been really nice. I have a lot of patients that I can treat that have alcohol use disorder. Thankfully, not all of them have severe use disorder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So I talk to a lot of people who, now that I'm out and open about all this, they come up to me and they're like, good for you. I've never really had a problem with alcohol, right? Or I'm not a heavy drinker. And yet they're saying this with a glass of something in their hands at one of these events. And in peeling back that layer a little bit further, they may only drink, socially at home, but at these events, suddenly it's like the permission slip
Right.
to overindulge 3 nights in a row at an event where they're supposed to be getting education in the morning. So I know that that's sort of a social, I don't know, thing, but What would you say are some of the kind of overlooked or surprising ways that alcohol impacts us physically or mentally in those types of behaviors?
I mean, at those kind of conferences, so I've seen that happen actually at conferences that I've been to, and I wonder, so alcohol, heavy drinking, even binge drinking can actually be worse than just drinking daily. It can put a real toll on your body. Um, we talk about, of course, hangover, and it can affect your productivity. But whatever you learned that day, you might not remember after having a, binge drinking episode and and then blackouts are really bad. Over time, they don't count as, and we think blackouts are, oftentimes being like on the floor and stuff. Blackouts include not remembering events of the night before. Those are
Mm-hmm.
blackouts. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and depending on those type of social situations, it can also be very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You could be taken advantage of, etc. So there are those things. People also don't realize oftentimes that even a little bit of drinking, you can have anxiety the next day and irritability the next day. Not necessarily a hangover feeling, but you're just not as productive. And being at a conference like that, you need to be on your A game, right? You've spent money, you're taking your time away from your family. I see that a lot. And I think a lot of it's like mom and dad are away. We go become like those kids again, Uh,
That's right.
all responsibilities are gone. We're living in a suitcase. We can do whatever we want. But it comes with a consequence oftentimes. Um, I can't imagine you being productive after drinking like that for the rest of the conference.
Yeah. So moving into a little bit more of a serious thing, in January, on January 17th, the U.S. Surgeon General came out with a report stating that alcohol is a leading preventable cause of cancer. Also documenting that less than half of Americans know this. So, in this list of recommendations, they suggested putting a warning label on all alcohol containing beverages to this effect. Like, wow, that's significant. But what have you seen as the reaction to this report? And do you think that this is going to do anything, change anything? What are you hearing in your circles?
Well, I got excited because the nation's doctor, he stood up and spoke for all of us because we all know this, that this has been alcohol. We've known this for more than 10 years now. Like I said, there's a lot of data coming out over time that shows that alcohol is bad for you, not just for cancer, but for all the conditions I had listed earlier. Um, so I'm enthusiastic and hopeful. Um, you need someone with his position, in society to speak up. So if you look at the history of tobacco use, really it's awesome because it was after a Surgeon General wrote a report on the harms of tobacco use that all of a sudden tobacco use substantially over time. It's picking up again now because of e-cigarettes, but if you look at it, it's like a Mount Everest. It kind of goes up and then all the way down almost after the Surgeon General, wrote that disclaimer letter. So I'm hoping that this will cause a shift in our society and our culture, and I'm very proud of him for doing that. I think it's not easy to do that. There's a lot of big business and politics regarding these psychoactive substances, and so
Mm-hmm.
it makes me very happy and hopeful.
Yep. So the last thing I wanted to kind of dig in with you is this. We started at the beginning talking a little bit about stigma. You work with patients, and there is this stigma around choosing not to drink, as if like sobriety needs to be explained or justified. So, how can we start normalizing alcohol-free choices in these professional settings, particularly?
There's two types of stigma, right? There's the stigma of the person, other person, and then there's the self stigma. I
Mm,
think a lot of folks in recovery, there's a lot of shame and guilt, a lot of bad memories, And a lot of times they haven't forgiven themselves, you know. Uh, Again, I don't know you, Margie, very well, but 18 and a half years of keeping yourself in the closet, I'm sure that there was a lot of self-stigma there. We need to break that because like I said, we need to celebrate you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Society, you know, really educating people. I mean, 15% of the country, you know, has some type of substance use disorder. Every person in the country knows of someone, friend or family member, with a substance use disorder. We have to be okay with this. Um, I'm hoping in professional settings, you know, companies are doing this. I know, for example, what I can speak of directly in my fellowship program that I'm the program director for. Now it trains addiction docs, but we have a component in our didactics where we really focus on stigma because
Mm.
you see it in institutions like even hospitals and in policies in other providers in our nursing staff. I always say this: the person that's most judged in the hospital system is a pregnant woman with a use disorder, you know, and that's
Yeah.
not fair. So going back to your question about conferences stuff, I think the first thing to look at is, you know, self stigma, and then really, you know, pushing you leading and others leading with you, you know, that, you know, we all need to be okay with, you know, not having, we should be proud of our recovery journey. And we should be proud
Yeah.
of our friends and family that have recovery journeys.
Well, I know things are changing. Thankfully, there are celebrities who are now getting, out there in front of all of this, talking about their own choices to not drink and their own mental health and all of that. That's amazing. I'll tell two personal stories. One was at 10 years sober. I was going to be giving a talk, and it was a very important talk in front of a group that was potential new clients, and they didn't know me. And so I decided that I really wanted to open with my passion and my why I was there so that they could connect to me. And I told a brief story about growing up in an alcoholic household and the chaos that ensued and vowing I'd never be like my mother. And then by my 20s, turning out to be just like my mother and the chaos that I then rained on my kids. And then at the end, I said, 10 years later into my own sobriety journey, I recognized the people that showed up for me to help me become a better version of myself. And that's why I want to show up and help you become a better version of yourself. So the audience was leaning in. People came up to me afterwards, thanking me for my authenticity. But two people who were very influential separately came up to me afterwards and said, great talk, Margie, appreciated it, but you might not want to talk about that alcohol thing. And that was enough for me to clamp it back down again. And I never spoke about it again until 8.5 years later. So now here we are a year and a half ago, and we're at a conference, and my co-founder was talking about her own sober journey and how it helped her. And she just sort of spontaneously said, how many people in this room don't drink for whatever reason? And so I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh no. But I slowly start raising my hand and I look around the room, and like 15% of the room is also slowly raising their hand. And that's when she and I grabbed each other and formed Sober Life Rocks. We later learned that a group of women went to dinner later, and one of them said something like, I can't believe that people would raise their hand and admit to the mess of their lives. So it's still out there and it's
Yeah.
still challenging. So in neither of those cases was it necessarily, my own stigma that kept me from speaking up, but rather the reaction that I got from people. So I'd love for you just to take 1 minute and talk about, for people listening who might encounter those sort of scenarios and want to be supportive of people who have chosen not to drink. What are some ways that you could advise that?
You know, when you ask this question, I think I would say like be like my mom. I mean, my mom would just whenever something was wrong that was being done around her, she would speak up. She would speak up. I still remember one time we would go on dates and just mom and son, and we would always actually the same thing we'd always do. We go to a buffet, and she liked this Chinese buffet. And I remember one time, for some weird reason, the manager over there, you know how you're supposed to eat and then pay,
Yeah.
and the bill comes after you finish your food. Well, the bill came first to these four gentlemen, and they may have looked out of place, but they don't. They said, I don't think we're going to eat first before you give us the bill. And the manager looked up and kind of like shocked, and my mom spoke up. She said, she looked at them and, good boys, good job. And then she told the managers like they're gonna pay afterwards. And I think that's kind of it. We all gotta just speak up for each other, not just folks in recovery, but friends and family of folks in recovery. We're it's this is we all have to speak up because there are always gonna be people, there's always gonna be people that have judgment. And I will also say most of those people that have judgment, it's because they've been hurt before. And that's really it. And if we don't take that personally, but still speak up in behalf of our friends in recovery and family in recovery, I think that would be the best.
Yeah, that's amazing. What would you like to say as the legacy you would like to leave in this world?
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of a calling of mine. So I think the key thing, what I try to do and emphasize with my trainees, and my peers is that, folks that have a substance use disorder, whether it be alcohol or anything else, they do get better. They do. We just have to help them, and we have to not lose hope. And they do get better. And oftentimes, when they do get better, they're actually better people than they were before originally, and a lot of times better people than most of us because they've had to really had to change themselves, and really had to, you know, dig deep to change themselves. So that's kind of one of the things that I say a lot. I just keep
Mm.
reminding because people where I practice, oftentimes you're like, patients keep coming back and struggle, and there's relapse and there's slips. But I have to remind my peers and my trainees that more people than not get better.
Mm.
You just
I
can't lose
love that.
hope.
I
Yeah.
love that. I can't thank you enough for spending time with us, for bringing your expertise and your wisdom and your perspective. It really, really means a lot to me. And as we wrap this up, one thing's clear. It is time to rethink the role alcohol plays in our lives and in our workplaces and in our culture. Like, we don't need alcohol to connect or to celebrate or unwind. We have the power to create environments where sober choices are not just accepted, but embraced. So here's what I got from this: your call to action. Start small. Speak up at the next work event or ask for more alcohol free options. Support people who are choosing not to drink, or venues or gatherings that prioritize this. And change the narrative that alcohol is the key to connection, because it's not built on having a drink in your hand, it's built on being in each other's presence. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or colleague or anyone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Sober Life Rocks for more inspiring stories and real conversations about choosing a life that aligns with your values. Let's keep it going, because sober life doesn't just rock, it transforms. Thank you so much.